My name is Brianna Hiddle. I am the Strategy and Operations Lead at the Public Safety Communications Research Division. I am moderating this session with my co-moderator, Brad Morell, the FirstNet Authority Director of Network Operations and Technology and International Engagement. And Brad and I are joined here today by esteemed panelists from across the world. We'll be engaging them in a discussion about their status of their efforts to deploy public safety broadband capabilities worldwide. But before we get into that conversation, let's introduce our panelists. Brad?
You guys hear me? Yeah. Yep. Okay, so I'll let the panelists introduce themselves too. So every one of the people up here I get to call peers, coworkers, and most importantly, friends. All very accomplished, a great representation from the world. So I'll let them introduce themselves, and the one known as Jeff.
Just Jeff. Going forward, that's what I'll be known as, just Jeff, with the First Responder Network Authority, the Chief Network and Technology Officer here in the United States. Thank you.
Guillaume.
So I'm Guillaume Lambert from France. I'm the director of the ACMOS, that's the Public Safety Broadband Network Agency. Very nice to be here.
Right. Farrell.
I'm the chair of Critical Communications Broadband Group in TCCA. TCCA is an association serving all of us globally, driving critical communication, mission-critical voice, data, and video in all situations, ranging from the services from mission-critical public safety, military, but also transport, railways, oil and gas mining, all those industries, bringing things together to find common solutions.
Antti.
Yeah. Sorry, you missed me. So, hi, Antti Kauppinen from Suomen Erillisverkot. We run a program or service called Virve, which is like FirstNet, and we are just transitioning to broadband. And I've been here for 23 years, and currently I'm the Director of New Business and Innovation. I was previously the CTO, and before that the Program Director for the broadband.
Great. Lance.
Good morning, everyone. Lance Falcor. I'm a retired inspector from the Ottawa, Canada Police Service and a life member of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and have been working very closely with many of you and folks from across the United States for many years on this issue, and look forward to giving you some updates in a bit.
Great. So some of you that have heard for the first time or here for the first time hearing some of the global things may be asking, this FirstNet's focused on the U.S. public safety. What? Well, I'm a little worried about the rest of the world. Well, what FirstNet moved forward with is rapidly moving across the globe, and our focus is how do we make the world smaller? Dr. Merrill talked about this earlier with the World Fire Conference. He talked about same problems, the fire administration. Coming from a long career in public safety, I'll say the mission of public safety is a global mission. Firefighters do what firefighters do. Doesn't matter what side of the equator they're on, what side of the date line they're on, it's the same. Mm-hmm. Police officers do the same thing. The laws may be a little different, they do the same thing. EMS, we do the same thing. So how do we make sure that we are collaborating? How do we make sure that we are getting the speed of deployment of networks? How are we gaining efficiency? How are we saving money? We're good at making mistakes, and we're good at learning from those mistakes. So how do we keep sharing with them? The other part we face in broadband, we think roughly there's about 100 million connections for public safety globally, give or take. We're trying to influence standards, influence vendors that are looking at a market of over 10 billion connections. So we're a grain of sand on the beach. Our voice has to be unified. Our voice has to be pushing in the same direction. And we need to constantly be looking at new innovations and how we find ways to get things in the hands of public safety. And this group's going to talk about all those things. And they're all, as I said, good friends. And we've been working on stuff for many years. We have several events that we meet at around the world and talk about public safety. And the mission of public safety, as I say, that we're all brothers and sisters in blue in uniform. So, I'll turn over.
On that note of togetherness, so for those of you that were here last year at 5x5 and joined the international panel then, we had a great conversation about collaboration and the need to share information with one another as different countries on the stage and throughout the year. We're going to continue that conversation today and specifically emphasize the need for innovation both at the near-term deployment of broadband technology as well as what's coming down the pipeline for future next-generation technology. Both ends of the spectrum, pun intended, are essential for advancing public safety communications and keeping pace with industry. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started in some questions. Given FirstNet's lens of the immediate deployment of the network and network operations, near-term deployments, Brad's going to be asking our panelists questions about their recent and current efforts. And with my PSCR lens of looking 10 to 15 years out at the next generation of technology, you can expect my questions to be all about the future. So with that, Brad will kick us off.
So the first question I'd like to ask is Antti in Finland, and to help level set for everybody here too, is understand in Finland, we in the US think we have some issues and some things we have to work on. So Finland, you've got a very large border with a country to the east that wasn't too happy of some NATO joining recently. And I think in your own words, you've told me in some areas of your country, it's so rural, there's many more reindeer than people. So Virve has been out for a couple of years now. I'd like to hear some lessons that you guys have been learning on how you're getting coverage and dealing with some of the unique challenges in Finland.
Yeah, the coverage is difficult. I guess it was mentioned here yesterday that if we don't build a base station up north, which is the rural area, we will get fired. But if the commercial operator builds a base station there, they will get fired because we are in a different business. We are in the life-saving business and they're in the money-making business. So, but it's there. It's built into the contract with the radio operator, and so we are happy that we have that. Otherwise, if we look at what we have learned, is well, a while back I built my house. So I bought the tools, I bought the material. Turns out it doesn't mean that I can build the house. It's the same here, that we went into the model where we only have service for the radio access network operator without our own frequency. And there is 3GPP functionalities, etc., etc. But it doesn't mean if the functionalities are there that it works. It's tweaking the network where we coexist with the consumers in the same RAN without as little as possible effect to the consumers. So we have priority, we have preemption, but of course the operator doesn't want us to affect their business too much, and we accept that, and we understand it. It's okay. So the tools are one part, but you really have to learn how to use it, and I'm happy to see how well FirstNet and AT&T have pulled it off. It is impressive. And another thing is that the user engagement. So I still believe that every dollar, or in our case euro, spent into user adoption, you get back with larger adoption, with faster adoption. And in our case, that's important because we have to get all of our users from the legacy Tetra system into the new broadband. We are not building on top something new. We are building something to 100% replace the existing very good system that is getting too old. And so I guess that is learn how to use your tools and user adoption.
Getting that user adoption. Well, we're going to come back to that. You guys are doing that too in a minute. So let me transition over to you in France. So if I remember, you guys have some kind of events coming up. I can't remember what they're called.
Olympics, maybe.
Oh, that's right. There we go. The Olympics. So ECMOS, the peer agency to FirstNet, has deployed the radio frequency of the future, the radio of the future. And you're in the process of doing a lot of testing and validation and looking at venues. You just recently did stuff with the Rugby World Cup. Can you talk for a minute about some of the testing and validations that you're doing to give that proof to those uniformed folks that are always a little skeptical?
Yeah, right. We are just about to open the RF services by the very beginning of next year, but Right now, we are doing a lot of testing and measurements, in a step-by-step manner to check that the service meet all requirements and specification. So this testing are key to get the acceptance of the systems. And beside this measurement and testings, we also run some demonstration milestone with the end users. And so we will organize some of these demonstration as a progressive immersion in real intervention situation, for the end users. And today in France, near Rouen, that's in the center part of France, we organize this testing with our end users. And that's key because we want to gain confidence of the end users towards the RRF services so that we can test through this demonstration the different services we will provide the end users. That is to say, the network, of course, with a priority and preemption mechanism. That is the M6 services, mission critical services, the direct mode, and the gateways between narrowband networks and broadband networks. So these measurements are very important in the RF roadmap.
That's great. We're excited to hear about that and keep the partnership and collaboration we have as we in the U.S. face World Cup and then the Olympics on the West Coast in L.A. So we look forward to learning from each other more as you take a breath at the end of summer and it's over and you say, wow, we did that.
Yeah.
Some questions.
Okay, Just Jeff, we're coming to you next.
There you go.
Yesterday, we heard from Joe Wassel's keynote about FirstNet 3.0 and the network evolution investment. Can you talk more about what FirstNet is investing in to evolve the public safety broadband network and all that it entails?
Sure thing, absolutely. Joe mentioned FirstNet 3.0. You may be thinking, for those that are new, what was 1.0 and 2.0? 1.0 was really that consultation phase after the law was passed, talking to all states, talking to the territories, talking to public safety. What does this network need to be? We put out 13 RFIs, asked industry, asked government agencies. That was 1.0. 2.0 was the initial build. We had $6.5 billion put on contract to get the core and the RAN built out over the last 5 to 6 years. That was reached in March of 2023. That $6.5 billion was from the spectrum auctions that funded all of this to happen. That's what public safety fought for, along with the spectrum license nationwide. 3.0 is really our transition now into the reinvestment into the network and the capabilities that we're going to enhance and build upon from the 4G LTE network that we've built now. And I want to thank all the team. We've got a lot of the FirstNet Authority staff here in the room as well. They've spent the last 2.5 years really working to do this next phase, and it's that full 5G standalone upgrade on our dedicated core network for FirstNet, as well as the upgrade of the band 14 to the new radio waveforms. That's really the core the network elements upgrade, and that was around $6 billion. We've also announced or close $2 billion of coverage enhancement that will be part of this overall 10-year upgrade cycle to the tune of $8 billion. Tremendous amount of work. I want to recognize Brian Crawford, Finance Chair. He made it and made sure we were doing the right things, leveraging that PSAC input that he talked about in the earlier award session, and all the input we received on the network today and how we're building those enhancements into the future. That's not going to stop. Our goal is to always include public safety's needs into that $8 billion over the next 10 years as we upgrade the network.
Thank you, Jeff. It's really exciting, and I think a huge part of the feedback we're getting at this event as well. Brad?
So let me switch over to our neighbor to the north, Canada, Lance. So for those that don't know, Canada has set aside the same spectrum as the US FirstNet, band 14. Our neighbor to the north, we've been talking with for decades now on trying to move things forward. Lance, you bring a long-standing career in uniform side, and then now as an advisor with the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. Love to hear from you on some of the things that you see Canada working through and some of the challenges they're facing as they try and move forward with build out of a broadband network for public safety.
Thank you. Yes, so first and foremost, again, huge thank you to FirstNet and the folks that came before FirstNet and the PSCR and folks like Chris. I was so happy to see Chris. Congratulations, Chris. Outstanding award. Chris, Harlan, so many others have been such huge supporters of ours in Canada, and we can't thank you enough. So that's very positive. Less positive is that we are still struggling with the issue of governance in Canada. So without getting into a history lesson, we have a very different approach to governance in Canada, federal, provincial, territorial. So it's been our vision, and I say that as the chiefs of police, fire and paramedics, and other first responders in Canada for, well, since 2012, that we would have a not-for-profit, so a very different approach that would be the national licensee. And that entity would then work collaboratively with the states and territories and kind of moving forward. Very positive. We have, I see good friend Joe Fournier here from the Government of Canada, Defence Research. He and their teams have done, I know they work closely with you, outstanding work getting ready on all the technical sides, right? So they're ready to go. And the good news is that we had a very important set of meetings last week in Toronto where we brought together first responders, industry, government, and really spent most of our time talking about what exactly does that governance body look like, to the point of, well, who should get a vote and those kinds of issues. That it sounds kind of bureaucratic, but I've lectured on governance around the world, and you build good governance when we're all friends for the days when we're not friends, right? So that it's very clear about what happens. And so that's very positive, and we're hoping that in the not too distant future, kind of like those lights in our eyes right now, we're hoping it's not a train. We think it's light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you.
No, it's great. It's as you said, it's a different approach, but as the old saying goes, all roads lead to Rome. However we get there, getting the broadband in the hand of public safety. We know every country up here and countries that we deal with all the time, everyone's taking a different path, but the end of where we go to is the same. And you guys have a conference coming up for the chiefs to try and talk through this and many other things, right?
Yeah, thanks. So next February in Toronto, so if you're involved in this and interested, so the chiefs of police, we used to hold these under a different banner. This will be the 14th. PSCR and FirstNet have come to almost everyone, and again, thank you for that level of support. So it'll be in Toronto next February. Just kind of go to the Chiefs of Police of Canada website and take a look. You'll see it there. A wide range. It's a very small version of what we saw here, but broadband's there, alerting is there, Next Gen 911 is there, advanced situational awareness, ATAC, drones as a first responder, all the kinds of things we're talking about. Trust me, I'm in the back of the room thinking, oh, well, that's cool. That's a good speaker. So thank you for all the help. Appreciate it.
Great.
So we'll keep talking about this future, but there is that transition period with the convergence of what's present today and what's coming in the future. So Guillaume, I've heard you talk about that ACMAS isn't in a rush to converge devices, and it's okay to use land mobile radio for voice and LTE for data, and we're in a similar position here in the United States. But can you talk about, is there a point in time where we'll inherently intertwine data with voice, and how can we plan for that future?
Yeah, Bri, that is not entirely true, because we do want to offer the end users mission critical voice, video and data from the start. But of course, we have to organize the transition between the existing deployment of our PMR, that we call the Tetrapole system in France, and the broadband solution provided by RRF. So we cannot make the transition nationwide at once. So it will take time. It will take, roughly 3 years to migrate from narrowband solution to broadband solution. But still, we want to offer the full range of services to the end users from the start, and to organize this smooth transition as possible, the smoothest transition as possible for the end users. So we will organize some gateways to interconnect the narrowband system and the broadband systems.
Thank you, and thank you for clarifying. Absolutely, and we know that transition will be shorter for many countries in European nations that are moving off of broadband.
And maybe if I can add one point is, you have to take into account the financial aspect of it, because we cannot afford to pay for narrowband systems and broadband system for a too long period of time. So we have to plan carefully this transition so that we cannot overshoot the 3 years time we are allowed by the government to manage the transition to be finished.
Absolutely. Thank you, Guillaume. Taro, I'm going to come to you, and you bring a different perspective to this panel representing TCCA, the Critical Communications Association, and the perspective as its many members all across the globe. Giving your insights across TCCA working groups and activities, now looking a little bit further out, what priorities do you see being placed on 6G future generations globally?
6G, good heavens. Well, let's start with putting a bit of a timeline for 6G. 6G will be the dominant technology we'll all be using basically in the 2040s. So that's what we are looking for. At the same time, another aspect, really important aspect, is that all the societies are becoming more and more dependent on mobile communication. Just imagine if you didn't have a mobile phone. I actually had that a few months ago here in the US. My subscription had a mistake and it didn't register at all. I can tell you it was very, very difficult life. Trying to find free Wi-Fis everywhere and arranging your entire life by just thinking like, where's the next free Wi-Fi? And that has happened quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and this trend is going forward and forward. So imagine what is the level of dependency in the entire society in 2040s of mobile communication. Now, on this point, in TCCA, we have been studying this. We recognize that this is probably the biggest thing that we would need from 6G. The 4G, 5G, they have been designed fundamentally to provide better service, better connectivity, but they have not been designed to be really available. They are basically best effort designs from the standardization point of view. And now it's time to have trust as the key design principle of the technology in standardization. But whatever is being done, that the first question is that how this contributes to trust, how does this contribute to availability, security, coverage. From public safety point of view, obviously connection is the lifeline. But we believe that once all the citizens in the society can always rely on availability of network, they can build their business models, we in public safety also get what we really want.
Thank you, Taro, and for underlining that importance of trust and reliability. But the future does open up a lot of doors for emerging technologies as well. Throughout this week, we are talking about things like augmented reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning. You'll see this in the demo room. You'll be discussing this in sessions. And these technologies that will become increasingly available on ubiquitous and efficient network capabilities. Jeff, what major benefits do you anticipate for public safety in these next generations?
Yeah, great question, Bree. And I was able to give a presentation at CCW last month around this following on Taro's comments. And I got to thank Taro. He really drives this public safety worldwide focus and vision. The wireless enhancements don't stop. As Taro mentioned, 4G in 2010, 5G in 2020s, 6G standardization, initial deployments 2030s, full 5G in the 40s. We have a standards team already working now, and the timeline is in the next 2 to 3 years, those working bodies are going to start on 6G use cases. And that's commercial use cases predominantly. But what we have done in partnership with TCCA and others around the world and the networks that are coming online, you hear some of them now, is focusing on those public safety unique requirements in this connected world and in the wireless environment. Some of those that we're driving, Joe Wassel has coined the phrase joint operational situational awareness. That's where everything's headed. How can they leverage these networks with AI on top of that now? And I noticed at the drone challenge, the Shark Tank yesterday, almost all the sessions included a version of AI using that as part of this. That's going to be a tremendous game changer, we think, as well for public safety. What does that look like? I think my good friend Derek, what's your last name? Derek Orr mentioned that, and we're not sure yet. But the work is going to continue. There is a insatiable demand for wireless broadband connectivity in the world markets. So we're excited with that. The teams are starting 5G Advanced now. But that 6G standard suite, as I mentioned, will really start in earnest with about release 20 in 3GPP. I mentioned the JOSA, the AR, VR, that data analytics and intelligence, the space to ground. We had a session yesterday talking about some of that. There's now the non-terrestrial network focus within the standards bodies on the wireless networks, and these multi-layered architectures of not just terrestrial, UAVs that are connected and providing coverage, LEO, GEO, all the space-based ones as well. We also see billions more IoT sensors. We had a fantastic session this morning with Dr. Merrill. All these sensors that need connectivity to share what they're sensing out in the field, whether it's fire, weather, et cetera. That's going to continue exploding as the number of connections grow worldwide. And again, more spectrum, getting that 6G timeline and upgrade, but ensuring our small community worldwide, Tara, what's your comment? It's stretching maybe 100 million connections worldwide for public safety on these networks that are competing against the 100 billion potential connections from the commercial market. So having this collaborative effort worldwide in standards and to drive vendors worldwide and others to support the public safety needs is critical to that moving forward.
And actually unplanned, but we did have some news that came out last week, and I think Jeff was just touching on this importance of standards and collaboration and testing. And Tara, I'm wondering if you can share with the audience some of the news we had out of the GCF certification last week, on really exciting on mission critical services.
Absolutely. Having standards and sticking to standards is obviously very, very important. But at the same time, standards are very big, and it's difficult for a procurer, but also for a vendor to know that, have I done this correctly? And on that one, TCC has been working together with GCF, the Global Certification Forum, in order to have automated test sets available for mission critical push-to-talk service and in later stage for mission critical voice and data. And now that certification path is available, and the first certificate has been already issued. So now one can actually demand in procurements 3GPP conformant capabilities on mission critical services, be it voice, video, or data. And that is immense because it drives the market, it drives the competition, it drives eventually to also interoperability, and I'm so excited about that, I must say.
Thank you for sharing that. We're really excited too, and it emphasizes that just collaboration piece for me, truly, because one of the award recipients we had at PSCR years ago that's been with us through several grant programs that had the testing as a service or tasting grant, you might know, they built the tool that was used as part of this. So a huge win for everyone involved.
Absolutely. The globe is thankful to PSCR on this one.
Brad?
So Tara, will keep going into a couple of things I want to talk about. Your view from across Europe and actually all the different parts of the world too that you see with TCCA. Curious, and so everyone also understands too, every country, as I mentioned earlier, is deploying networks. Several countries have nationally managed, funded narrowband networks. There's just one network, and several countries are looking at, all right, we're going to turn that off and turn this on, doing that. So you see some pause or hesitation at times. What are you seeing, Taro, as one of the resistance? We heard earlier, like, well, we're waiting to see what happens with 5G. We're waiting to see what that architecture looks like. And now you're seeing stuff, well, let's see what 6G looks like. What are you seeing as some of the hesitations are? Is it financial? Is it technology? Is it, let's see how the US can just make mistakes and figure it all out first, and Canada will work with us in France? What do you see?
Well, I mean, it's about people's lives, right? One goes to harm's way, and so I have a lot of sympathy for the decision makers to try to make the right decision and be sure that it's right. Having said this, in a lot of their European countries and many other countries where there are these single national networks, basically the base stations of those narrowband networks are coming to their end of life, technical end of life. The technology many times, like Tetra, is likely to be available until 2050s and so on. So the technology as such continues, but the base station will have to be replaced, so you have to invest, either buy the same stuff or move forward. And generally, nations are looking forward to move forward. Now, a bit of a question, like you were mentioning 4G, 5G, 6G, which one to choose? There are other big category is the legislation and regulation. Is that in place? In democratic countries, it generally takes 1 or 2 election cycles to have a new law in place, plus the finance. And that basically dictates then which technology to do. I'm pretty convinced everyone wants to go there fairly fast as possible the national situation enables. But say, let's take India, federal nation, 1.3 billion inhabitants. They are starting and defining their legislative situation right now. Considering the size of the nation and the complexity of the project, I think it's obvious that they will not start with 4G, they will go with 5G. Whereas many others, 4G is just fine to start, but when you get your core, automatically, of course, it needs to be 4G, 5G core. You don't skip anything which you can have today.
Great. Ante, I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier too on engagement with the end users, and we know that that's vital. You talked about how you've been doing it in Finland. Curious to hear how that helps shape Verve 2.0, and then how are you using that to evolve the network and go forward, and what some key lessons you're hearing and things from public safety?
Well, when we were starting, we were trying to look abroad through different nations how this thing has been approached in general, which basically at the time was only UK or US at the moment. And so we got lots of information from FirstNet, then CEO of FirstNet, DJ Kennedy, was kind enough to visit us in Finland for a few days and explain how it was done here. And I guess that sort of became the baseline for us. So we did extensive work to collaborate with the end users, both face-to-face. We did electronic surveys, got lots of answers to form a broadband strategy. And in the strategy, we're trying to find out which is important for the end users, which of course we expected to translate into, if we make these things happen, the adoption will happen. And it has actually worked quite well. Also, we tried to find the correct price point, which is acceptable, which is not. In our case, it means that the government will give us money for the rest. The government doesn't want to give it for free, otherwise there are too many of those which are needed, the subscription terminals. Or if it is too expensive, then the fire brigade will just build VHF or something. So we have to find the correct level. As a company, of course, we are government owned. So in our external board of directors, we have, for example, Defense and Ministry of Interior. So we are already steered by our customers. Then as Virve 2 is part of governmental ICT services, it has a cross-organizational ministerial steering group. So we are in, I think in maybe 10 different levels steered by the government already, but it doesn't mean that we can build something that isn't what the end user wants, because they will not take it into use if the trust isn't there. And the trust is only, it also means offering possibilities to pilot and test it and see how it works. One organization told me that they want to test the new system at least for a year before they are really ready to let the old one go. So it takes time, and you have to support them and accept that it takes time. So it's really basically a footwork. So you have to do it. Sometimes it surprises me that even though they have something in their mind that is wrong, that they need, they will not tell you if you don't go and ask every now and then, how's it going? What do you need? What do you expect from us? So it's just all the effort you put into end user collaboration is worthwhile in my mind.
Yeah, I think the essence of what mission critical means, it is a no-fail mission. So we need it to that 99 point and how many nines you want to keep going. And I think that's a great area we can all collaborate saying, hey, we're showing testing, we're showing in here devices. Jordan, I've talked about this, the cost of devices. How do we have larger influence to try and get those prices down with vendors? So great insights. Thank you.
Lance, it's so great having Canada here this year as we share such a significant border. Great to see you as well, but we share such a significant border. We're also on the same spectrum. It's critical that we're talking and working with one another. Can you talk a little bit about how we need to be both technically and functionally interoperable given our shared borders? And this is an issue pervasive across the world with many European countries sharing many borders as well.
Yeah, we chatted about this yesterday. Our first Canada-US cross-border interoperability workshop, which we did in partnership with the old OEC and Chris Essett, was in Niagara Falls, New York. Sorry if you're from New York, but we have the better falls on our side. It's just a fact, right? But that's where we were. And we were talking, that was 2009. And then we had another one the following year in Windsor, across from Detroit. And Windsor's a nicer city, sorry, Detroit. But you have a good football team now. So this has been a long-standing issue. And things like treaties that take time to do. But it's just critical for many of you, probably, unless you live and work in northern New York or Alaska, you don't understand that every day, firefighters cross the border, each way, every day. And even more so, paramedics cross the border every day. Because often the hospital's on the other side of the border, or the specialty of a particular hospital is on the other side of the border. So when, for example, a paramedic driving an ambulance in Ontario gets halfway across the Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia, the moment they hit the halfway mark and they're now in the United States, they're now driving a truck. It's not an ambulance, because it's not recognized as such under the Highway Traffic Act of that state. They are now talking on a radio, which after many years is now legal because we had a treaty change that took almost a decade, and they're transporting narcotics illegally into the United States. Or vice versa. DEA, nobody from DEA here. So these are issues. So these are functional issues, right? So, and then from a communication standpoint, how do we share that? So, traditional land mobile radio works on what's called a treaty, block and zone. So Detroit, much larger, it has a larger block of the spectrum than Windsor does. That's how it works. This is not how broadband works, right? It's the same spectrum. So you could, if you've never been to Detroit, you could almost, if you're younger and stronger, throw a baseball across the river. Not quite. So if there's a major incident in Detroit and a major incident in Windsor at the same time, who controls the virtual knob that says you get what? How's that going to work? And this was a topic that we discussed in 2009, right? So we don't yet have an answer, but this is something that we absolutely need to do. And then on the technology side, if you look at all of you, and we still follow the interoperability continuum. Thank you, SafeCom, for creating that. We changed the spelling around to make the spelling correct for Canadian. By the way, we had one war. We won. Get over it. That always works. So one of the lanes of that is exercises. So Joe, just stand up for a second. I want people to know you. So this is Joe Fournier. He's from the Government of Canada Defence Research. They have done with the HSS&T a number of experiments over the years called CAUS, Canada-US experiments, one cross-border interoperability. I believe there's going to be another one in a couple of years, so if you're interested, not talk to Joe. But this is the kind of thing that we need to do on a regular basis. Because, how do we get our kind of motto is how do we get the right information to the right people at the right time? right? And the right people includes members of the community in the case of alerts or warnings or whatever. And the other thing that I'd kind of throw out there to our friends, our good friends at PSCR, because you are looking out over the horizon, is one of the things that I'd love to see, and you're probably already working on this, is how do we make sense out of this? So I was an incident commander in Ottawa. I've hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of major events. I protected President Bush in 2004. We had 2,000 police officers, 700 public order officers, all of them at full riot. He wasn't very popular, apparently. So it was a big deal. 7 different radio systems, none of them would talk to it. None of the kinds of things that you can do today, right? How do we make sense out of that? NASA today, this second, is monitoring, I don't know how much information from around the universe. And somewhere in all that is a little piece of data that says that thing's going to blow up if you don't push this button. Yet we expect our people to make sense of thousands of pieces of information in seconds. So if you can help with that piece, that would be really cool.
Absolutely, that's a great point made, Lance, and that cognitive overload that comes from digesting so many different pieces of information coming at once is a huge challenge, and something we're looking at those emerging technologies to utilize and provide only the information that a responder can utilize in that moment, whether if they're boots on the ground responding, and then maybe, as I think Derek mentioned yesterday, preserving some of that other information to incident command or someone else who can assist. So thank you for that. Brad's going to wrap up with a question for all of our panelists.
Yeah. So as we look at collaboration, as I said in the beginning, how do we keep making the world smaller for public safety? I'd like to ask each of the panelists to take a couple minutes and talk about, from your opinion, for the audience to hear and everybody, a call to action or suggestion you have that you'd like to see that would help us forward the benefits of broadband for public safety of the mission so that we become more efficient, more effective, and better doing it. So Guillaume, let me start with you.
Yeah, my call for action will be to increase cooperation among us because, as you say, when introducing this panel, the public safety mission are very similar in each countries. A French cop has the same duty that an American one, Canadian one. So there are not much difference. And the system we provide them to communicate is the same, but we are only a small segment of this mobile world because, public safety stands for millions of users, whereas, for commercial operator, they care for billions of users. So we have to work together to get leverage on this market, to drive the innovation, to drive the way standards are evolving, to drive the roadmap of the vendors. So that is my call for action.
Great. That's great insight too, as you keep doing that. Terrell, what's your thoughts?
Well, building on that one, stick to 3GPP standards.
For sure.
Require certification and procure that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, getting to our industry partners, we want them to innovate. We want them to invest. So they want to see the standard. It's like saying, hey, build me a house. Where's the plan? Just a house like this. Well, what do I build you? Well, like this. We need those standards to drive it and then get them to see it. Jeff, some of your thoughts on there.
Sure. So I'll use an acronym we've been using in the FirstNet Authority. We love acronyms. This is a technical conference, and everything we focused on wirelessly. Listen, learn, and lead is really the 3 L's we've been focusing on. And whether you're public safety, industry, government agencies, worldwide partners, listening to what the users are telling you and what they need out of the network, learning from them, and then leading and helping solve those problems. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to interrupt their job of saving my family's life or my home or responding to a catastrophic event. How can we make this consumable for them and not have to, as Bree and Derek talked about, interfere with what their job is, which is saving a life or property in responding to that. So listen, learn, and lead, I think, is apropos across all levels for everyone here, and understanding how we can meet those needs and make their jobs easier on that front, especially with the communications aspect.
No, that's awesome science. Antti.
Yeah, well, erillisverkot used to have a slogan in the PowerPoint sheet. In English, it said success in cooperation. And I'm really happy how we are doing cooperation, how erillisverkot is cooperating with the end users, how the end user organizations in Finland are collaborating with each other. What I would like to see more, and this is something that I think would be very beneficial, is that end user organizations from different nations to collaborate more. And it's something that, because we probably have a better network to do that than they do, maybe we have to push them, facilitate that event, give them opportunity to interact with each other. I think that would make sense, get them on the same path. A broadband strategy was mentioned and 6G was mentioned, so maybe we can collaborate on making a broadband strategy for 6G together. Now that we are more or less in the same phase, we are all either in broadband or making the transition. So I think this would be a good time to perhaps deepen our cooperation and write something down about the future.
Wow, 6G. I'm hoping I'm retired, but. Lance, some thoughts from Canada?
Yeah, so starting from in the room and then working up, so for the Canadians that are in the room, well, you're already involved, so thank you for coming here and for being involved and helping to be leaders of this. But, reach out and, touch a few more friends, and I'd love to see more Canadians here next year. I'd absolutely love to see that, and I'll certainly do what I can to kind of support that. And then kind of moving up, if you represent a northern U.S. or Alaskan organization, then reach across that border and get involved. And if you don't already know your counterparts on the other side, please do so and work on things like these exercises and get involved that way. On the same vein, if you're on a northern border or Alaska, reach out to your elected officials. In the United States, the Governors Association is very powerful, and they have a northern compact with the Canadian counterparts. I'd be willing to bet, some money that if you were to talk to the representatives from your state government organizations, they would understand what this is all about. If you were to ask them to have that conversation with their counterpart in Canada, I'm afraid that they would give them a very glazed look. So at the next time that they're holding those kind of Canada-US cross-border governors and premiers meetings, maybe get that on the agenda, right? That would be very helpful to us. To the people that are beyond those regions, then first and foremost, be very, very, very thankful that you have these two groups working with you and for you, because they are outstanding. And if we could poach them a little bit more, that would be really cool. I guess my final point is decisions are made by those who show up. So for those of you that are in the room, thanks for showing up. It is the way.
This is the way.
There you go. So I think some great insights, and hearing a lot of great things in words of cooperation, collaboration, sharing, moving stuff across the borders. I know our goal on the FirstNet Authority, since we started this and we're seeing the other countries deploying networks, is how do we get it to where we're the fewest on the stage and most on the stage are the uniformed folks. So we have uniformed folks from France talking with uniformed folks from Seattle, from Chicago, and others. There's a lot of stuff that gets solved. Being an old public safety guy, an old firefighter, we can figure a lot of stuff out. We deal with a lot of complex problems and we solve them. Having solved some international problems in my uniform days, I reflect back to those that have been at Emmitsburg would appreciate this. We had solved what we called the Ott House Treaty of Cooperation. And for those that know what the Ott House is, they happen to serve alcohol there, and you get a bunch of firefighters together, have a few beers. There's not much we can't solve. But it was all about we knew each other. We built friendships, we exchanged, and we constantly move forward. So I think it's important that we do that. So we've got a few minutes left here. We'd like to open up the floor to some questions anyone has. And see, Joe's got his hand up from Canada. From the defense side of Canada, that's spelled with a C, not an S. Hold on, we've got a mic coming over to you.
Thanks. Hello? So it's not really a question, it's more a comment, and I just wanted to thank you, Lance. For those of you that don't know Lance, he's a great compliment. You're like our Harlan McEwen. So thank you very much for that. And you've inspired me. He doesn't need to be here today, believe me, or still on the mission of public safety broadband. It's just his passion and commitment. So thank you very much.
Did you call him the Canadian Harlan? I love that. That is great. The Canadian Harlan.
There's no such thing as any other Harlan. There's only Harlan, right? Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Other questions? Just raise your hand up. We'll get a mic to you. Comments?
Are we letting Donnie
Donnie.
ask questions?
Just on the record, Donnie.
He's recording the whole thing, so yeah.
Donnie Jackson, Urgent Communications. In terms of the different business models, one thing I guess I get the impression that in Canada you have the spectrum identified, but not necessarily the money and all that kind of stuff. Some of the other places that seem to have money, but you're using the carrier spectrum.
Yeah.
And then with the U.S. we have both. Or just kind of curious from you all's perspective. Do you feel like all three models can work, or is it something where you feel like, man, we'd have a lot more say if we had more, control the spectrum, or hey, or the money? I was just kind of curious how you all saw those things as barriers or advantages.
I can jump in there from a Canadian perspective. If the United States government wants to give us $8 billion, we'd be happy to accept it. But the reality is,
with my finance chair down here.
all those in favor? No. But the reality is that's not going to happen. So when we got the spectrum, again, we borrowed with pride, which we borrowed from our British friends. We borrowed with pride, like all the marketing material that was happening that created what became FirstNet. We were taking that stuff, Canadianizing it and using it, and that's how we got that spectrum. But it was quite clear to us from the government of Canada back then that, listen, here's your spectrum. It's worth a lot of money. As you know, it's probably worth more today. Don't be looking for a whole bunch of other money. There may be some seed money that kind of kick things off or whatever, and that's the government of Canada is about to release a consultation paper in a not too distant future where some of these questions will hopefully get answered finally. So we believe in, again, going with the movie theme, if you build it, they will come, right? So we believe that. Now, when you go to the finance people and say, if we build it, they will come, they're going to go, that's nice, show me your plan, right? Where's the money coming from? So we are actually working on that, and we see ways forward. Would it be nice to have the money? Sure it would. It's not the way kind of it works. And so I think a good example of that in the States, you have grants from the US government and state governments on a lot of things. That just isn't how it works. So from the Ottawa Police perspective, if we need a new radio system, we start setting aside budget years in advance, right? And then we build up a capital budget, and then you buy something, right? So we're kind of used to this. And we believe it can happen and will happen and should happen.
Yeah, in Finland, well, I think we all agree in the States it would be really, really nice to have lots of spectrum for yourself, of course. That said, if you just have the spectrum and you only can use that spectrum, which would mean that you would have to build nationwide network, just using that spectrum would again be expensive. And doing some exchange with radio network operator is of course possible, most likely option. But it's down to so many things. For example, how long is your contract period? We only have 10 years contract with the radio access network operator, which makes it much more difficult to make use financially the spectrum that you have. So it's every country is different. They look the same, but so many things affect what is the correct approach to you that there aren't two similar solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to second that. Say spectrum policy varies from nation to nation. In some places it's beauty contest. In some places it's maximize the buck. And obviously, in a beauty contest country, the cards you have in hand if you have spectrum is different. In some countries you cannot have spectrum because there might be a big neighbor next to you which can interfere everything. The question is
Have that? A big neighbor that does that turns up there?
that would be a question for him. And at the same time, you hardly can have enough spectrum to provide the capacity in a big incident and then the related coverage. Then the risk profiles are very different. Say if you compare UAE, which is fairly small, United Arab Emirates, a fairly small area, but from their perspective, they see that's a fairly high risk profile. At least they want to let us know that, look, they are investing in public safety. Sure. Therefore, they have a dedicated network with 15 megs spectrum up and down. So one size really does not fit all. There are a whole lot of parameters for the service model and the business model. And so answer your question, yes, different models can actually work.
Yeah. So in France, we chose a full MVNO approach, and we use commercial spectrum, in major, in most situations. We do have dedicated spectrum, band 28 and band 68, but we keep that spectrum for special purpose. For instance, compact, rapid deployable will use this dedicated spectrum. But that's the very reason we have these features, thanks to 3GPP, so that we have some guarantees with the commercial spectrum when we use it, with the QPP mechanism, quality of service class identifier, the famous QCI, the priority and preemption mechanism that brings us guarantees when we use this commercial spectrum and deliver mission critical communication services to the end users. So, and that's the most direct approach, the time to market is very short because you can, this commercial spectrum is already available.
Yeah, Donnie, I know you know this, but for those in the room that aren't aware with the FirstNet 1.0, again, Harlan said it well. This journey in the United States started in 1995, getting to where we are. And it was driven by public safety. They advocated for the spectrum, for the funding to get their network built. We had 9/11 tragedy. The final 20 years ago was the 9/11 Commission report. And one of those findings was dedicated spectrum so public safety could get a nationwide capability for communications. So our model, we're very fortunate in the United States. We don't take that granted or lightly. And we were able to align the incentives with our industry partner AT&T to keep this network self-sustaining. Again, we get no more money from Congress or anyone in the US. It's all built on that business model and aligning the incentives to serve public safety's needs, as well as what that commercial incentive is with using the band 14 spectrum as well. So we're very fortunate, but we also like learning on these other models, how they're doing it in other countries. Again, we had 56 little countries to figure out in the United States how we're going to do all this, and they're in some of those models now. So it's fantastic learning from and seeing it. And I'm convinced as well, Guillaume, different models will be successful, depending on where you're at. So.
No, and it's great hearing that. Diversity is, I think, of the diversity of ideas, diversity of approaches. We all know those different ideas, that diversity makes us all stronger. We all get to the same place, and so I think that'll keep benefiting us.
So just a quick comment. I think excellent panel. I know we're coming towards the end of time. Talking about cross-border, talking about standards-based, etc. I think it's important to at least mention that the initiative from the European Commission regarding operability, interoperability between the different countries. I know that there are at least a couple of countries on the stage who are actively involved in the broad EU net program. So maybe if one of you would make some quick comments about that.
Well, yeah. I think next to you is the gentleman who could answer the question best. But
I'll hand over to Remo.
yeah, so basically, well, Finland is a Nordic country, but we do lots of collaboration with Sweden and Norway. So we go back and forth the border all the time. And this is happening, of course, even more in Central Europe, where there's lots of small countries where basically, the border doesn't exist. You don't know where you are at any given time. So it's just have been notified that the new system has to realize that the criminals don't care about the land borders, nor can your systems that you use when you're trying to catch them, for example, or utilize healthcare, etc. And from regulation point of view, for example, it was really, really, really difficult to get Finnish public safety user priority over a Finnish consumer. Imagine getting Finnish public safety priority over a Swedish consumer. That's even more difficult. And then to do that pan-European and make sure that you can talk with your partners back home, but also with the users in the country that you are visiting as an end user. So it's really complex. And being EU, it's quite bureaucratic, but at least it's going to the correct direction. And it might actually even require some 3GPP activities in the end to make it work, which hopefully can be benefited globally at some point.
Sure. So it's great been getting to exchange and work with the EU and the EC on that. So we're out of time here. So Bree, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, I'd like to start by thanking our panelists for being here this week and taking the time to travel all this way and speak to you all today. Please continue to connect with them throughout the week while they're here. But first, a round of applause for you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
And then I want to prepare you all for what's coming next. We have a really exciting opportunity that's been teased this morning. If you all make your way downstairs and out front, we have 3 public safety agencies local to Chicago providing public safety demonstrations to us. So Oak Brook Police, Chicago Police, and Chicago Fire will all be beginning those demonstrations out front in about 10 minutes. So take your time, look out for traffic, but we'll be meeting in the front drive and down the sidewalk.